morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 4 and episode number 492, I think it is, of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Also, episode number 58 of the True North Eager Beaver Interview Project here on the Crier Media Network. Yeah! Boom. Today, recording day is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, and I think it's going to be quite a lovely day here at the Beaver Lodge, although rather crisp. Last night it got down to 2, so yesterday we were in the garden and picking up all the tomatoes off the plant and all that kind of stuff for a sort of final harvest because it was going to get a little chilly here. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him. Hey, Mr. Beaver, eh? Ooh, that looks like a nice morning in Ottawa. And with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. Thank you so much for your support. Before we go any further, Mr. Grizzly, how's your mental health today?
Well, good morning, Mr. Beaver. And how is my mental health? Well, to be honest with you, when I wake up, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'm feeling like that too. It was a late night. It was one of the 9:20 p.m. curling match things, and so I don't get to bed. I don't get home until midnight, and then to bed till 1. It's like up early.
I wasn't curling last night, but I didn't sleep well. We got to bed later than normal and didn't sleep well. Tossed and turned a fair bit. I think it might be time to put away my air conditioner, though, in the bedroom. I think summer has begun to slip away from us and that we are definitely in the autumn season now because it was only like, 2 or 3 degrees this morning. So, yeah, we're getting, it's 2 degrees, 3 degrees right now. Ooh, it went up a degree since
Ooh. Ooh.
I got up, it's gone up 1 degree. Ooh, it's a balmy, absolutely positively balmy 3 degrees Celsius.
Yes. Well, just like you yesterday, I wasn't curling either, unfortunately, as well as I played last week, as terribly as I played yesterday. And all of us played. It was one of those matches that temporarily makes you hate the game.
Yeah.
And then the skip on the other team decided to curl 100% on the day. It's just like we couldn't hide anything anywhere. He was just getting everything. It was just so discouraging. It was 2-1 for them after 3 ends, so we were still in it. And I think like after like the third magic circus shot in a row that the other guy made, it's just like all the wind went out of our sails. It's like that's not going to happen for us tonight, guys.
Rough.
Oh, rough, very rough. I think we lost like something like 9-1 or 10 or something. It was bad.
Well, that's no way to start your week. Whatever.
Oh, wow.
Whatever. What are you going to do, right?
But we were curling, so curling is life. It's fun. Today, kids and cubs, we have a guest with us, which is why I said it's the episode 58 of the True North Eager Beaver Interview Project as well. Very short introduction for our guest. Very charming man, very informed man. I am sure you are going to like him and adore him if you are not already following him. As you know, Kits and Cubs, we have 3 provincial elections coming in the space of something like 9 days.
Yeah,
And the
that's a
first
lot.
one, yeah. And the first one, and the one that we have been the most focused on of 3 during this year is the one in New Brunswick, principally because Kits and Cubs, as we mentioned on a previous show, we have this rule in Canada about changing the constitution needing the approval of 7 provinces with at least 50% of the population. And we had to flip, Manitoba got flipped, but we had to flip one more to make sure that was at least under 7. And the best prospect for that was New Brunswick, so long as British Columbia stays in NDP hands, of course. And it was looking for a while like Saskatchewan might be in a play, but now polls seem to
Who
be
knows?
indicating that that it is not. Mr. Moe, unfortunately, has the slicker campaign and does happen to be, now the bar's not set that high, but does happen to be the better extemporaneous speaker, or at least the best speaker when it's something glossy.
hmm
So that seems to have won out over policy over there at the moment because there hasn't been too much controversial so far about the Saskatchewan election. There has been some things, but nothing like BC and nothing like New Brunswick. So, Kits and Cubs, we are going to get the real deal from someone who is very engaged and on the ground and knows a lot about what's going on because he's very much following this. So please put your paws up and give a big round of applause for the former mayor of St. John, New Brunswick, Mr. Don Darling. Welcome to the Beaver Lodge, sir.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you?
Awesome.
We're doing really well. Now, before we go any further, I always ask Mr. Grizzly how his mental health is doing today. How is your mental health doing today, sir?
Yeah, that's great. I enjoyed that. That's a great question. Great way to sort of check in. Yeah, I think doing okay. I mean, there's a heaviness, right? And you know, I have a life of being passionate about social equity, about raised by parents who taught us that you can make a difference with your voice, that it's important to speak up. I didn't always do that because as we grow, 54 years old now, as we grow mentally and physically, apparently. But as we go through life, you know, or we find our voice, we get to that, you know, I call it sort of a magic stage where I think, you know, we give less F's about, you know, whether I'm liked or, you know, I want to be around
Yes.
people who know who I am, who respect the fact that I have a voice. And so when you care about social equity, when you drive by the homeless and you think there's no excuse for leaving people dying outside in tents, when you know that everything happens in politics the way it was designed to happen, when you've been in the back room, there's a heaviness that comes with that. So it's a constant, need to just take a breath, just breathe, just work through this. And you know, just in the last little while, and I know I try to give you as short as answer as I can. In the last little while, I've been, you know, searching for books like how, when you're an empath, when you care deeply about others, how do you keep that in balance so that you're not so distraught by those things that you see in the world, those injustices, that you make yourself so sick that you can't function. So doing okay, but there's a heaviness and it matters. And, you know, I think through this campaign and really, you know, in the last, you know, 10 to 15 years of my life, you know, I have really lived my values and spoken up for, you know, the injustices that I see. And that comes with repercussions. People don't like it. You know, people get very uncomfortable. And I guess I have decided that I'm prepared to be the first one, not the first, but one of the first people in. And if people are uncomfortable, then maybe I'm doing my job.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I get that because not everybody wants to have the political conversation. Some people, you know, I think it all comes down to the, you know, it's like, you know, you go watch a hockey games. Ah, God, can we not have it about politics? Or, your favorite entertainer makes a statement, and it's like, that's Doug Ford said to Taylor Swift, like, it's like, oh, I'm so glad that you're coming to a city and yet you're going to make in 6 days 1/3 of what I promised that Therm will bring over 95 years. But just sing. Yeah, I bet he wants her to sing because he needs her to bail him out.
Yeah.
But it's that thing. I understand that some people want to get away from that every now and then. It's like, it's just too complicated, or I don't know enough, or, oh, not this again. Can we just enjoy life? But politics are still happening, whether you choose to ignore that they are or not.
Yeah. I think I've when I finished my time as mayor, which was both very rewarding and very frustrating at the same time. I think one of the takeaways that I took was the shock or the confirmation for me that there are many people who have privilege, who have influence, who have the capacity to make a difference for the greater good, and they stay quiet. They keep that privilege for themselves. If it comes to ruffling feathers at the cocktail party or, for their next business transaction, they choose safety and they choose their own influence to benefit themselves over the greater good. And I knew it, but when you really confirm it, it's heartbreaking, right? Because again, in New Brunswick, we have multiple billionaire families and they've done a lot of good. I'm not anti, I'm pro-balance. And the phrase I've been using in the last month is, if we have money to give to billionaires, we can solve homelessness in New Brunswick.
This is what we preach all the time. And the thing we're still scratching our heads over is how Blaine Higgs keeps bragging about an $8 billion surplus in the province of New Brunswick.
Yeah.
There's 850,000 people?
Yeah, it's not quite that. It's not that big, but it is, it's been a pretty significant surplus through his term. He's been 2 terms coupled together, 2018 to today. So essentially he's been the premier for 6 years. And here's the challenge. I heard the premier speak. I know him, obviously. I worked with him. I have firsthand experience that his handshake and a promise is not worth anything, which irritates me, which violates my values, which is part of why I'm so triggered by this guy.
That's in your capacity as having been mayor?
Yeah, having been mayor.
Okay.
My time as mayor, I quickly realized, you can cut ribbons and go to cake cuttings and go to retirement parties. That's wonderful. And I went to a lot of those. But what were going to be the foundational changes that could be made while I was mayor that would have a lasting and sustained benefit to the community? One of those items was tax reform. And Premier Higgs promised it. He shook my hand. He looked me in the eye, and he didn't deliver it. He broke that promise. And I'm really irritated by it. On a whole bunch of fronts. And when you talk about mental health, this next comment isn't going to be what my therapist calls wise mind, left brain logic, right brain emotion. The center of that is wise mind. Right. I feel like I let the community down because he promised me that he would do that. He didn't do it. And it's had a negative impact on the community. But back to surpluses. The problem is it's all he knows. So he's kind of angry that, why aren't you praising me more? I've created these surpluses. Well, what he doesn't recognize, if your definition of success is narrow, then your definition is surpluses, he's done a hell of a job. He's done a great job.
Yeah.
But if your definition is economic, social, cultural, environmental, we have a healthcare crisis. We have a cost of living crisis. We have a housing affordability and a homelessness crisis like we have never seen before. And we have an education crisis. So, in any balanced approach to what success is, and the majority of New Brunswickers rate this premier the least popular premier in the country and give him an absolute failing grade on healthcare, cost of living, and housing affordability. So if that shows up at the polls, then this premier is on his way out. But I'm skeptical.
So one of the things I complain about a lot and I will continue to complain about it until something gets done about it, which sadly, as you know, probably nothing will get done about it.
Yeah.
But my complaint is a province should never have a surplus. If you have a surplus, somebody somewhere is suffering.
Yeah.
Healthcare, education, childcare. Like you've got $8 billion, and I have family in New Brunswick who have told me that the healthcare system is failing horribly. Now, I have a recent experience where the healthcare system in New Brunswick served us very well, but that was a triage, and triage, as you know, in any part of the country, worst case goes first, and they take care of you quickly. But it's other people who are suffering and in pain who need to get a hip replacement or their knees done or a hernia or whatever the case may be, and they're waiting 18 months in some cases.
Yeah.
It's like, that's just not acceptable. If you're sitting on $6 or $8 billion, whatever the surplus is, put it into the healthcare system, put it into education, spend it on the things that people need the most.
Yeah.
And they're just not doing it.
Totally. But I think I agree with you. Like I have to come up with some new ways of describing ourselves. Like I'm a fiscal conservative. And really what that means for me is spend money wisely, get outcomes, respect taxpayers' money.
Yes.
Don't have scandals, don't abuse it. Don't, that. So essentially, but I'm liberal in my social policy, but again, I want outcomes. I believe in social equity. And again, the challenge here is we're very tribal. This election, again, has taught me a couple things. First of all, people need to go back to civics school.
Oh boy,
they don't understand, municipal, provincial, federal, priorities and responsibilities. I mean, the conservative candidates are going door to door and saying, Justin Trudeau is horrible.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau is horrible. Carbon tax, HST, and parental rights. Like it doesn't address at all the number one priorities that the people of this province have: healthcare, right, cost of living, and so on. So I think there's been a lot of takeaways for me through this election on homework, if you will, that we could work on. A group of progressive folks like ourselves could work on moving forward.
Agreed.
Yeah, I see that. When you're talking about Mr. Higgs, sort of looking at just that one thing, that's all he knows, because I think they just reported in September that for the year, the surplus, or the last fiscal year, the surplus was about $500 million, but they had originally projected $40 million. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a many multiple times over in a province with not a large population. So, I mean, per person, that's a lot of money. In terms of the surplus, that's money that was not spent on them. And there is a homelessness issue. There is, all the issues that are in every other province are there too, to varying scales. But I always say, you're crowing about having a surplus, but all the things that you mentioned are all areas of society and of life in which you actually have a deficit. At the moment. So it's like, yeah, look at me, I'm really great here if I'm looking at just this one line item, but there's more to running a government than just balancing a budget.
Yes.
Yeah. I totally agree, but and again, I mean, it's so tribal what we get into, right? I mean, certainly in New Brunswick, probably, the narrative, the branding, the decades of messaging are that liberals waste money and conservatives are the only ones that can manage money.
But it's not true if you look at the data.
Well, sure. But and again, like as we're, I've been very, very vocal and really outside of my own comfort, because I have really been, to the best of my ability, nonpartisan for decades. Except the last couple of years, I've looked very, I get accused every day. You're a liberal, you're woke, you're this, you're that. Now, I've got lots of problems with Justin Trudeau and their government. I've got lots of problems. I'm going to hold, I hope, our next liberal premier in New Brunswick accountable to deliver on the tax reform and the other things that she says, not only that she's going to deliver, but the behavior in which she tells us as New Brunswickers and me as an individual, how she's going to show up, transparent, accountable,
Mm.
all those things. But I'm back to for decades here, when I post something like I did yesterday, someone asked me a day or two ago, why are you so vocal against Higgs, our premier? I said, that's a really fair question. So I went home and I thought about it, and I articulated and I shared yesterday on social why. And just real quick, he doesn't empower teamwork. He disrespects process and engagement. He lacks trust. He ignores crises, short-sighted focus, micromanages, zero transparency, spins and blames, shifts cost to municipalities, and lacks decency and integrity. So that's my list. And I said, I'm prepared and proud to, there it is, and share with others examples of each of those. So, what I get back, though, is I get back just really partisan. Liberals are woke. Only conservatives can manage budgets. He's created a surplus. He's going to cut the HST. And I say, folks, how is that going to address the number one priorities that we have? Mm-hmm. But last night I was out doing a little bit of door to door, and someone said, well, and again, like I just finished saying, not partisan. Right now, we have to retire Blaine Higgs. There is so much at stake to have a switch of government here right now. So I'm out doing things that I haven't done very often in the past. I'm out doing some door to door. And one of the people at the door said, well, I might support David Alston, this Liberal candidate, but I don't like his boss. Mm. I said, fair enough. Who's his boss? Who's his boss?
And he said, Trudeau.
The person said Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
I said, Justin Trudeau has nothing to do with the provincial. In fact, my understanding is Justin Trudeau and the leader of the provincial Liberal Party haven't even spoken. So, it's not as, because if that's true, Pierre Poilievre is calling Blaine Higgs every day and telling him what to do.
Right.
Right. So if you don't believe that, then so this civics and understanding, I believe the system, and then I'll let you get another question and stop ranting. I believe the system is purposefully designed to keep people confused so that we can have elections about nothing. And in some cases, reelect elected officials who don't deserve to be reelected. And we have to change that.
See, now, here's the thing that when you're telling me all of this, you have people going like, why are you being partisan? I don't hear partisan. Mm-hmm. I hear I am anti-incompetence or I am anti someone who just categorically refuses to see and meet the needs.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that it is to a point that I feel I need to throw my body in the game. It's not that I'm partisan. It's that I'm comparing my alternatives to each other, and the choice imposes itself because one party or one person has ruled themselves out.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's a great reframe, right? And in fact, I said something similar yesterday. Someone said, now do this list I just showed you. You showed your audience for the Liberals. And my response was, absolutely. Once they're in government, I'll do a similar list at an appropriate time. Day one I'm not going to do it. Right. But a year in, I'll do it. And I'll hold them accountable to deliver, to act with decency, to act with integrity, to be transparent. It just, at so many levels, and this undermines trust in our democracy, because we live in an incredible country with incredible people who care deeply about one another, but we're being weaponized against each other by elected officials who have, in my adult life, never in time do I remember where elected officials are so comfortable lying, sharing disinformation, spinning, biting apples, being arrogant, acting without integrity, and I just love MPs walking through Thanksgiving weekend in grocery stores talking about how expensive squash is because of carbon tax. And my response is always the same. That MP, I did it last night, Anna something from Ontario, that MP made $203,100 last year, plus committee work, and billed taxpayers $520,000. and you're having a hard time convincing me you're genuine and you're concerned about the price of squash, like at the grocery store. If we're going to fix it, let's deal in fact. Let's be nonpartisan. Let's define what success looks like, and let's get back to, as we've said in the past, being, disagreeing without being disagreeable. We've thrown that all out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing that struck me about that was she went to 9 years of the NDP Liberal government. Okay, that's not even a thing to begin with, number one. And number two, since when does the federal government control pricing for independent, free market, capitalist grocers? It's an oligopoly because there's like 5 major grocery companies in the country. Is there even that many? There might be less.
4 or 5, yeah, I think.
But the thing is, it's like the federal government does not control pricing on that. Never has.
Yeah.
Now, there were price controls in effect back in the 60s and 70s, if memory serves, but to what degree they held grocers responsible for keeping their margins at a certain level, I don't know. But when people harp on, it's the carbon tax, it's been proven that is not the case.
Yeah.
And look at the United States, we have similar things, and
they have no carbon rebate, no carbon regulatory recovery
exactly.
fee.
Exactly. But economically, people are performing like similar. And Statistics Canada just released the inflation numbers yesterday and said that the carbon tax is getting you. Well, the price of gas is down 10.47% or something like that year over year, including the carbon tax. So clearly that's not it.
But people can't wrap their head around it, though. Like, that's like, there are solutions, actually. I mean, most people aren't going to like them. I spent 2 decades in the housing industry. Frankly, I don't think any level of government has gone as far as they could go.
Agreed.
To address, we're talking about a fundamental here. You have to have safe, affordable housing to live, to thrive, to have mental health. Housing is, let's make no mistake about it, people make a lot of money in housing. A lot of money. And if we want to go to another level, I can tell you, slogans aren't going to build more homes. No. And unless we're prepared to really peel that onion back and start dealing with REITs and start dealing with all kinds of folks, people's home should be protected, absolutely. But from there, we need to re-examine and try to find a new balance in housing, for instance. But most people can't wrap their heads around it. Fuel is a great example. We have a carbon tax. Ontario has a carbon tax. In January of this year, I took the fuel volume that New Brunswickers purchased. Do you know how much more we paid for our fuel in 1 month in New Brunswick, in Blaine Higgs, New Brunswick, in January, over Toronto prices? $40 million in 1 month. So it's like, how do we arm people with data, back it up? Here's the calculations. Here's where it came from. It's New Brunswick volume, assuming Toronto prices. So what we've got today is we've got a lot of theatrics. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot of, we've got a lot of politicians telling us they care about us. But I don't know. I don't think they're showing us in their actions, their strategies, that the outcomes are going to be anything better than what they were. And sadly, the majority of people are too busy trying to survive to hold them accountable. And we need to figure out a way to help them with that.
Mm-hmm. So the campaign has been along now for a few weeks, relatively short campaign.
Yeah.
If you're looking, just as a voter, you have the 3 parties, you have the 3 leaders. How are each of them actually performing and delivering their message into like just pure politics? How are they politicking?
Yeah, I think, we have the NDP, we have a 4th party. Well, actually now we have the Libertarian Party, the People's Alliance Party. These are small parties. The big parties would be, of course, the governing Conservatives, the Liberals, the Green Party, and we have the NDP with smaller, and then the other smaller parties. I think the main, the main leaders are on brand. Susan, Blaine Higgs is Blaine Higgs. Like, look, if you're voting for Blaine Higgs, there's no surprise. You're getting status quo. He's presenting himself as the only competent fiscal leader. He's not, making any big promises, although he has come out and thrown a couple of Hail Marys at nurses. But look, this guy has pissed off educators, healthcare workers, union workers, even his own party. I mean, 48 candidates are running for 5 incumbents are running for this premier again. He's had the largest exodus of core caucus leave him in probably the history of the party. So he's on brand. He's hired Steve Outhouse, which is probably known to you guys. Steve ran Danielle Smith's campaign. I always love, and again, I'm spiritual. I believe in freedom of religion, but I also fundamentally believe in freedom from religion in our politics. So I love these folks that have pastor in their bios, but then behave in the worst ways I've ever seen someone behave. Right. So Steve is running a really elbows up, facts don't matter, slandering every day. Justin Trudeau is mentioned. So the campaign they're running is they're promising to cut the HST, the fiscal management message, and parental rights. And essentially that's their campaign. Susan Holt is offering real solutions, her version of solutions, a thick platform, lots of detail, addressing the core issues: healthcare, cost of living, housing affordability. Has a strong team, and I really think is offering a message of whether people buy it or not: hope, vision, empowering others, and coming together. And the Green Party, the Green Party is, again, on brand, addressing healthcare, cost of living, those kinds of things, some environmental, issues that are important to people. And the NDP have been pretty quiet. I mean, they have been making some sort of promises, but I don't know that they've really lost their footing in New Brunswick. They played a major, role in the past. They were the official opposition in the past, but they've really sort of fallen back. They're not the Manitoba NDP.
No.
So, I think this is going to be really come down to an election on whether people really want change or not. And I think the strong Tories they're on message. They're the only ones that can do it. And, I think Liberals are really having to rally to get the vote out and get a change. But the way our electoral boundaries are set up, like I live in a riding where, we have a Christian nationalist who speaks in tongues and gives supernatural blood transfusions in churches and resurrects people from the dead. Yeah, but is an eloquent speaker, looks the part,
very charismatic,
walks in a room. If the topic is economy and carbon tax, is going to wow you, and probably wins, because the left, the Green Party and the Liberals are going to vote split. So we have a lot of vote splitting that's going to happen here. So I think it's going to be very close. I think Susan Holt will form government, but I think it's going to be by a seat or two.
So here's the thing. Now, I understand, if I'm understanding New Brunswick correctly, that about 40% of the population is Francophone, about 60% Anglophone, that most of the Francophones will live in the northern part of the province. So there's a divide there. So it seems that even if the top line number on the polls would indicate that the Liberals have a 2 or 3 point lead, the way that the ridings are drawn and how there's like an built-in advantage for the Conservatives. You have to win by like 4 or 5 or something in order to flip enough seats to take the lead. Is that kind of correct?
Well, I think, there are Tory seats and there are Liberal seats that are generally looked at very safely, the North and the South typically. I mean, my region went all Conservative in the last election, but, none of the incumbents, one incumbent out of 4 or 5 are running again, right? So those seats would, seemingly be up to, up for grabs. So we have a North-South, we have a language divide, although, in the South, Moncton has a very large Francophone or bilingual population. St. John has probably 10,000, 11,000, Francophones or certainly people who are bilingual. So that isn't as black and white as it was in the past.
Okay.
But it will. This is going to come down to 6 or 7 seats in the whole province out of 48 or 49 seats. So these ridings are very, very close. And, I think very strategically, Blaine Higgs, 2 years ago, made a deal with made a deal with the People's Alliance Party and merged that into, well, didn't merge it, took out, promised the leader a cabinet position, and then left the party stagnated. Now they've brought it back to life, but he sort of merged the right. So, so they've got, but the left is still divided between the Green and the Liberal Party. So I think, very, very feasibly, you're going to see 4 or 5 ridings where the Green and the Liberal vote is higher than the Conservative vote, but the Conservative comes up the center and wins. So
Right.
I think there's been messaging the last week, where folks have said, hey, watch the vote split and, strategically vote and so on. But, my one of our adult kids is running for the Green Party in St. John in one of the ridings. And, their message yesterday was, hey, I value democracy too much to tell you vote for who you want to vote for. And, because for decades we've been telling people how to vote, and it's largely in New Brunswick, it's been Liberals and Conservatives, and, they formulate their own message. I'm very proud of them. They would make an incredible member because they represent diversity. They're younger. They have lived experience struggling with rent payments and having to call your parents every 60 days to say, hey, I'm short $400 this month. They would bring a great perspective. So it was interesting to see their take. The Stop the Split group, who I don't even know who they are, said, hey, vote for one of the opponents. And my child said, hey, don't let some group, we don't even know who they are, tell you who to vote for.
Right.
Vote for me, and vote because you want to vote for me, and let democracy play out the way it plays out, so anyway, it's interesting. So I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be very close, but there's a knot in my stomach because foundationally decent people with integrity don't do the things that this premier has done. And I think this really comes down to an election on decency. And my hardcore Tory friends who say, yeah, but he's run a surplus. And I ask them, do you drive around? Do you look around? Do you see that people are dying in ERs? Do you see that we have the highest per capita number of nurses leaving before the age of 35 in the country?
That's telling.
Do you see the deficits that we have?
Try and run
What good's a surplus if you're going to do nothing with it?
Well, yeah, but again, I mean, I can have a zero balance on my credit card and line of credit, and the roof blew off my house 6 months ago, and it's leaking, and my house is going to become garbage. That's sort of what's going on here in New Brunswick, right? Yeah,
right.
Well, one of the things we constantly say on this show is that we will never tell people how to vote.
Yeah,
vote for the best candidate in your riding, but we need people to understand. We do not elect a prime minister. We do not elect a premier. We elect a parliament or a legislature, whichever the case may be, which province you're living in. So you have a single candidate. Federally, we have 338 elections, effectively. And we need more civics lessons. And now we need civics lessons with members of parliament, because we have members of parliament blaming prime minister for provincial matters. And I see it all the time. And we have Jagmeet Singh is blaming Justin Trudeau for things that are provincial issues.
And he should know.
He should know. Sean Casey, a member of the Liberal Party for Prince Edward Island, says the number one issue on the doorstep, because he's the guy who came forward and says Justin Trudeau should step down. He says number one issue on the doorstep is healthcare. That's a provincial matter.
Yeah.
This is a member of parliament who doesn't understand basic civics. Who's responsible for what? This is really, really troubling to me. And as you said, I like my candidate in this riding, but I don't like his boss. Who's his boss? Justin Trudeau. No, that's not.
Yeah. Well, and again, just to pick up on that, I agree with your point. Absolutely. Or do they understand? And they're just choosing to go with the flow. Yeah, I think. And, it's not easy. When I ran, to be mayor, and I was like, I was off the street. Like, people called me up and said, like, who the heck are you? And are you kidding me? Like, you're running against the deputy mayor and you're running, like, you're not going to win. Like, people don't even know who you are. And I worked hard, and I think I had a decent team, and we had a good social media presence. And I just said to people, like, what you see here is what you get. I'm not, vote for me, don't vote for me. I'm not making promises I can't keep. And if I can't do something for you, I'm going to tell you. And, so I would argue in a lot of cases, they know the difference. They're choosing to weaponize and I don't mean ignorance in a negative way, like the lack of understanding, that's a better word, of the constituents, and going with the flow, taking the easy path. My biggest worry for what Pierre Poilievre is doing, and I'm really triggered by Pierre as well, right? I mean, I loved what Minister Holland said last couple of weeks ago. This is a guy that gets up in his government provided home, eats on his government provided plates, and then drives to work in his government provided car where he earns $297,000 a year, steps into his government provided office, then walks into the house where he's accumulated a $230,000 pension. Whereas I know, because I've run the numbers, bills $20,895 a day in expenses, and then pretends he's an average Joe. Like we need Canadians to understand, like we need to reset how we hold our elected officials accountable. But for me, it applies in New Brunswick and it applies in Canada. What is success? We have no definition right now, so anyone can claim it. And then ethically, I have worked with the clerk of the House of Commons, and in New Brunswick, there's no public mechanism to hold a member of the legislature accountable for their public behavior. No code of conduct, nothing. There's nothing you can do. So that has to change. Like we have to strengthen the ethics. We have to strengthen the behavioral so that when people, like, they know in the House, right, they can say things in the House of Commons and be protected, and they won't say the same things out on the street because they don't have the same privilege and protection they do in the House. So we need to work on definitions of success, social equity, educating and engaging with people so they feel more comfortable at holding their elected officials accountable. Like this is a big task, and it's not going to change in an election cycle or two. But right now, our elected officials feel really comfortable lying to people and straight-faced, just no worry whatsoever.
Well, and I don't know if you saw in Wales where they have put forth a bill to, and I don't know if it's law yet, but they're legislating so that they will make it a crime for politicians to lie to people.
Yeah.
There's sometimes you may say something and you may be incorrect about it, but if you're smart, you come back, you know what? I had the facts wrong on that one. I wasn't, but what you just said about Pierre Poilievre, is like this guy who lives in the welfare state and has his entire adult life.
Yeah.
His high school graduation photo says what is truly horrific is the existing welfare state. This man has never worked a day in his life. And I have friends who went to high school with this guy, and they said, I'm a different person today than I was when I went to high school because I've grown, I'm older, I'm experienced, I have a little bit of wisdom. This man is the same guy at 45 that he was at 15. In 30 years, he's grown not one bit.
Yeah. Did you see the Lincoln Project video? I thought it was brilliant. And they talked about it. It happened to be when Biden was still in the race, and they said, they showed, Joe Biden is actually, maybe when he stepped down, Joe Biden has changed. Joe Biden has learned. Joe Biden put his country first. And then they flipped to Trump. Trump is exactly who he's been. He's the same narcissist. He's the same guy. He doesn't tell the truth. I mean, the numbers are so important, right? I mean, I saw a couple of the comments you put up on the screen, and the numbers are so important here. We have a premier right now that's running on, they cut taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I dig in at nighttime. This is the kind of stuff I do. I open up my laptop. I open up my spreadsheet. I go into all the budgets for his terms. And the truth of the matter is this year, Blaine Higgs will collect $1.9 billion with a B, capital B, more in tax dollars than he collected in his first year in office. And when I then looked at personal income tax, and it's true, 1 year it blipped down, and the average person in New Brunswick got $9.91 rebate in their personal income tax. But then when you average it out, personal income tax is $2 billion a year. The revenue, a massive influx, just, $839 million a year more transfers from Ottawa. And I asked New Brunswickers, how is your life better off? So out of all of this, groups like yours, Crier Media, your podcast, We have to concentrate on somehow empowering, educating, engaging, and empowering. I think about it every day, folks, so that when whoever, insert name here, whoever says something, I don't want my MP. I don't care who. You imagine an employee that you pay $203,000 a year going to Tim Hortons and doing a video about coffee lids.
Yeah.
Seriously.
This is what we're paying
I would
for?
fire that person so quickly, right? We've got candidates running here in the election, Christian nationalists, people making explicit pornographic TikToks. When someone accused me last week of shaming that individual, I said, well, first of all, that's not my intent. Secondly, I was pointing out the hypocrisy of a Blaine Higgs government running under this parental rights and righteousness and moral compass and banning sex ed in high school, then finding out we have a TikTok star running as a candidate, and they defended her, they hid her, she's still a candidate. I was pointing out the hypocrisy of the party and of the candidate.
Right.
And the individual said, well, will you apologize to her? And I said, well, look, I would sit down, but it's going to be a far more broad conversation than whether I will apologize or not. And look, I'm a human being. I make mistakes every day. I've made mistakes while I was mayor. And if I think I would apologize if I think I have. It wasn't my intent to shame. Again, I just use that as an example again, that just like the hypocrisy, and it's all a distraction. Let's be crystal clear, right? The Angus Reid polls for Blaine Higgs, least popular premier in the country, absolute failing grade. 85 to 89% of New Brunswickers rate him poorly or very poorly on healthcare, cost of living, and housing affordability. And they did poll education, but I don't remember that number. So this is all a distraction. It's all a distraction from what matters most in this election, right?
Yep, indeed. And that particular, I saw that thing too, and we talked about it on the show. As you can tell, I'm not exactly just white.
Yeah.
There's a little mix in there.
Yeah.
There were some words in that piece of music that someone that looks like me couldn't help but notice.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, when you're going to look, and I'm triggered, okay, like what Blaine Higgs did here, and we saw it ripple across the country with Policy 713, is, take maybe 20 kids a year out of 150,000 that might be just trying to figure out who the hell they are. And look, weren't we all at that age? It might not have been our gender identity. It might have been something else. He absolutely weaponized that issue right out of the U.S. Playbook, and he has attacked. I can tell you, educators. I don't know about other provinces, but they're gagged. They can't speak up. Right? They can only speak through their union, and their union has tried to. But I posted a couple of days ago apologizing, like just feeling horrific for educators, and I've been getting personal messages that what Blaine Higgs has done, telling parents that educators are lying to them, keeping secrets, and these kinds of issues, we're going to have an educational crisis, because teachers that are now 3, 4, 5 years out from retirement, they're quitting, they're leaving, because it's already tough. Kids aren't respectful. It's just tougher to be a teacher today. I'll take that back. Some kids aren't respectful. They're different than I think we were, because our parents would have clobbered us if we were disrespectful to teachers, when we were younger, and so on. So it's just more complicated. So we have all of these crises, and more so now than ever before, we need leaders with decency and integrity who have the courage to make really difficult decisions. And when we have shitty leaders, we've seen what Blaine Higgs did with Policy 713 and the rights of to us LGBTQ individuals, and now we've seen it go right across the country, right? Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Alberta is looking to pass some of the most regressive legislation in North America. Yeah, right.
Yep, Rustad is bringing it into his campaign as well, and
So, and let's not forget that Daniel Smith wants to abolish the AHS, the Alberta Health System,
Yeah.
and hand it over to a network of Catholic hospitals that certain services are not provided,
Oh,
such as gender reassignment surgery,
abortion.
abortion,
Sure.
contraception, IVF. And she wants, and this is a private for-profit institution
Yeah.
that she wants to hand it over to. And meanwhile, she keeps cutting and cutting and cutting.
But that's where we have to have folks understand, and again, it's never been more difficult, right? Because
Mhm.
there's so much disinformation. The media, journalism is under attack. Professional journalists are drowning trying to figure out what this new world looks like, and at the same time, like, I'm convinced I'd put a $500 bet down today on your podcast. First of all, it's a very personal ideology, religious personal ideology for Blaine Higgs. But actually what's going on, it's a purposeful undermining of our education system, so that if he wins again, mark my words, he will announce he has no choice but to provide taxpayers funded money to Christian private schools who are going to fundamentally focus on good family values, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's where we're going. That's where we're going in New Brunswick. And we know how that's turned out in Saskatchewan. We have one of the largest class action lawsuits in the country.
Right.
Look, I won't go down that lane as far. I believe in public institutions. They should be well run. And I don't want them undermined so that we can give money to some private group that we're going to find out 10 years from now was connected to someone who knew someone who knew someone who made billions of dollars because we gave them all of our tax dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of things that you mentioned there. So, like when we were talking about Mr. Grizzly, when you were talking about abortion in Alberta, in New Brunswick, that is a huge case, because if I remember correctly, there was one clinic, I think it was a private clinic, and now it no longer exists. So, I mean, unless you absolutely have to go to a hospital for something because something's an emergency, you can't get one.
Right.
I mean, legally you can, but in practicality you can't.
Well, it's exactly what has happened, and in fact, I mean, it's interesting. You speak to my own child, and I never know what to say. They're 30 years old. Is it child, adult, child? I never know what to
They're
call
always
them.
your children.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Always your baby.
And when that first happened, Mariah said, "Dad, that's this much about abortion." That clinic, you may not know this, that clinic was run by a doctor named Dr. Egger. Dr. Egger had a caseload of 3,000 patients and was one of the only clinic in New Brunswick providing gender affirming care. So Mariah's, from day one, Mariah said that was wave one. That was phase one of an attack on the trans community. And I think that's absolutely what happened here. It was about abortion, but it was also, they knew if they took Dr. Egger out of the system, then they were going to dramatically push back gender affirming care.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing this sort of comes along to it, because when you're talking about policy 713, the thing that really sticks in my craw, one of the things that sticks in my craw with this, as a member of the overall rainbow community, is the open attack against teachers, the open attack against nurses, like when you mentioned the nurses, he's sitting around and says, I'm going to promise $26 million to help you cover some pension liabilities or whatnot. And it's like, well, I mean, again, you just said the word coming out of his mouth is not worth anything. And like, why didn't you offer them that 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Right. Why only within 10 days of voting day? And then you're sitting here like this, the teachers are lying to you. It's like, are the teachers lying to you, or are the teachers just recognizing that there's certain pieces of information that don't belong to them to share?
Yeah.
It's not, I'm hiding. It is not my information. This is some of the deepest, most personal, intimate information about another person that one can have. And so, it's like, it's not mine to tell you. I'm not keeping it a secret, and I am not spreading it. It's not mine to do anything with, keep secret or share.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Well, where we
I
brought up,
don't understand this attitude of like trying to make people believe like this. Number one, not only that teachers are keeping secrets, that teachers are encouraging students to lie, but also like, hey, how was your weekend? Would you like to get a sex change? We can make that happen for you. Just go to the nurse's office, Brad, and you'll come out. You'll come out as Brenda. I
well,
mean, that's
but we
happening nowhere.
but we know that there's an underlying. I mean, really, what's not being said. I mean, if I could clip together, look, had Premier Higgs said, look, we have a really important conversation that needs to happen. I don't want to politicize it. We have a child and youth advocate. I'm going to give this topic to the child and youth advocate. I'm going to give them a year. I want them to fully engage with parents, students, experts, social workers, psychologists, and whatever he comes back with in his report, we're going to implement it. I would have given him a high five. He didn't do that. I mean, the policy doesn't talk about curriculum. He's talking about kitty litter boxes. I mean, it's clear. He's already decided. I know one of the parents that they brought into cabinet to speak to cabinet. She's a local St. John lady here, good friends of ours. And she blew the whistle on them because she brought them into cabinet. She gave an impassioned speech on process and what could happen. And they called her back the next morning and said, we've already got the answer on what the policy should be. Could you just review it for us? And she said, absolutely not, and blew the whistle on it and so on. So the guy doesn't value process. He already had the answer. And if the process doesn't give him the answer he wants, he fires you and so on. So I think what makes me so sad, people don't understand actually what's going on here. But really what Blaine Higgs is saying to a lot of people is that the absolute worst thing that could ever happen is that their kid might be gay or might be transgender, and he wants to give those parents an opportunity to convert them or do something else. I mean, some warped mindset. And I can tell you, he has ripped this province apart. He has ripped teachers apart. And he has pitted New Brunswickers against each other, and he has made the marginalized less safe. And leaders don't do that. No. Leaders don't do that. And we're seeing that now repeated across this country. And what I try to get people to understand, okay, policy 713 doesn't matter to you, right? Maybe you don't understand it. Insert healthcare for seniors. Insert care for the most marginalized, social supports, homelessness. Because the guy will do the same approach. His approach to the homeless, throw them in jail.
Yeah, that solves. That's what we're currently doing. And what has that solved? It's done nothing but create budget deficits and cost us billions of dollars in tax money, when we could do what many countries, Finland being an example, house the homeless. Yeah. And guess what? Something like 75 or 80% of them went back into the workforce, cleaned up their lives, and became productive members of society again, which is isn't that what conservatives want? More cogs in the machine of the economy? Yet they're going to throw away an entire group of people because they see them as less than. And it just disgusts me to no end.
And the entire investment that, if we're just talking pure dollars, pure selfishly, the entire investment throughout all their lives in terms of health and education and whatnot, all the money that we put up front into people, like this, that we hope they will pay back later on in life by becoming, maximizing their potential to contribute to the economy, making the highest salary possible, and contributing their fair share of taxes. Like, if a life that ends at the age of 19 or 20 because of it, it's like, that's a life that costs the state a lot of money. You want that person, like, if you're just talking pure dollars and cents, you want that person to live as long as possible and be as productive as possible. Why are you setting them up to fail after putting all that money in them? I mean, if we're just being pure crass, it doesn't make sense economically.
Yeah, sorry. It's a shirking of, I can feel this boiling over in me. It's a shirking of responsibility. I mean, fundamentally, I think the problem is we've got many conservatives that believe, it hasn't happened to you. You've done it to yourself. You you've made all the mistakes. You've,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just get a kick out of, like, here in New Brunswick, right? I mean, Blaine Higgs in one breath. I can tell you, if the federal government had not invested in infrastructure here in New Brunswick, we'd have nothing. So in one breath, he's got his hand out. And then the next breath, he's beating the crap out of Justin Trudeau because he spends too much money. It drives me bananas, right? And like, I always ask my conservative friends, Justin Trudeau deficits, and I said, oh, exactly. So in New Brunswick, the federal government paid for 98% of all COVID supports.
Yeah.
Which of those COVID supports would you have cut? The one you got yourself in your company that you didn't need? Like, so it's like, let's get past the rhetoric and past the slogans and let's actually get into a conversation. Because I go and have coffee with social workers that I know who are going out and serving the frontline homeless. And I ask, like, tell me about them. Tell me about addictions. And, a month or two ago, one of those conversations, Holly said, like, I can tell you, Don, if you become homeless, it's a question of not if you will become addicted, it's when.
Mm-hmm.
It's because you have to stay up all night. You're freezing to death.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to sleep during the day. How are you going to do that? You have to medicate yourself in some fashion. The drugs are being perpetuated in the homelessness camp. Like, it's the fact that we allow this to continue to go on. And I don't just talk about it. I presented the provincial government. I found 1,700 beds in a work camp that I presented the federal government with. The last 2 years of my life, I've been working on social housing and affordable housing solutions. You know how many units we've built? 0.
Yeah.
Because on the 1,700 beds that I could have deployed in 6 months, a new, like, probably, 50 buildings every 30 days, I never got a phone call back. Right. So we have to be able to find a way to deal in fact, hold elected officials accountable, and define success in some way that is economic, social, cultural, environmental, and measure overall well-being. Until we do that, I think we're just going to keep spinning around in circles.
Which is sad to say, but I think you're correct. And what you say, I find informative and not surprising. If you find yourself homeless, it's not a question of if, but when you will become an addict. Yeah. And the addict, it could be a drug, it could be alcohol, it could be Lord knows what, but you're going to become addicted to something because you're just trying to cope, and the stress placed on your body and your brain of not having a safe place.
Yeah.
It just,
Yeah. I wanted to ask about some issues that I haven't seen too much in the press covering the election. Has there been anything whatsoever during the campaign related to Indigenous issues?
Yes. The on brand. I mean, the premier has fear-mongered, like he continues to do. It's sort of his approach, I think. He's basically, in his one-page platform, put a line in something like this. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. We will defend against Indigenous people trying to steal your land.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So because again, his phrasing, or his framing is the better word, of this issue is, we're in court fighting the Indigenous community because they want to come and take all of your land away. The Liberal Party has said, we're going to redo and build a thoughtful, mutually respectful relationship with the Indigenous communities and find a way to address some of the key concerns that we have in the province. So that's the juxtaposition of the two framings of, and it's sort of on brand again, isn't it? Like, it's, but I'm disappointed in I would have said the version 2015 of Justin Trudeau, right, made big commitments around, Indigenous communities. How in 2024 do we still have Indigenous communities in our community, fellow Canadians in our country that don't have clean, safe drinking water? Right? So we don't just need talk, we need action, right? And I always say to folks, like, you are confusing announcements with outcomes. Announcements don't matter. They're the first phase. Like, the Premier Higgs is talking about the fact that they've announced 10 schools. Well, I can tell you, your kid can't go to school in an announced school. They go to school in a built school, right?
Yes.
So that's the framing. Blaine Higgs, because what's he really saying? Indigenous people are bad. They want to take away your land. They're going to take away your company. They're going to take away everything you've worked for. And the Liberals are saying, time out. We're going to work with Indigenous communities to figure out what it is that we need to address, and we're gonna work through those issues. And I would say the Green Party would have a very similar approach of respect, starting with respect, and how do we work through this?
I can't help notice the irony of them being upset about the equation going the other way.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Gentlemen, I've got to go.
Yeah.
But Mr. Beaver, we're just going to stay and continue to have a nice, wonderful chat with you. It's been great, sir. I appreciate the time you took with us. I gotta take my doggie out because she, and then I got a meeting at 8:30. So it's been great meeting with you. Great having a chance to talk to you. Hopefully we can have you back again sometime soon, maybe post-election, and we can get some take on that. But I have to take my leave. I will see you again, and you take care.
Okay, perfect. Take care.
Right. I've got control of the production, kids and cubs. This is about to go downhill real quick. No, I'm still new to the production, so sometimes I don't exactly stick the landing. But the other community that I've been asking about, because there's a lot of people that watch the show that are members of the disability community, and again, I've been scanning the news and I haven't heard much mentioned about it. So is there anything in the campaign regarding them?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, we saw the Premier in the lead up. I mean, we saw more announcements in the lead up to the election than we saw from the Premier in the previous 2 years. So again, and what I think is so disconnected for so many New Brunswickers is he promised really not to behave like typical politicians. He has this slogan, province first or people first. Actually, with Blaine Higgs, it's politics first, right? And so, I think there was an increase in some disability supports, very minor, announced prior to the election. But really, those that are disabled in our communities have really also been, they continue to be marginalized, forgotten, and we have to do so much better. And if we have a lens of social equity, and if we define success where people are not left behind, then it will paint a very clear picture on what we have to do to bring folks up to that level playing field. And but we also have to recognize, like, it irritates some people, right? Those that have, those with privilege, those, why should we have to give those people, because you've got front row seats at the Raptors, and most folks have never even been to a Raptors game. Silly analogy, but it's like, so I think it's been there. I think it really, again, comes down to decency and integrity. If you're a leader like that, you're going to recognize that those that are disabled, anyone marginalized, anyone in a minority group is really not doing well. And, if you think of like our rents have increased 38% in New Brunswick in the last couple of years. So you can imagine the impact that has on a group of people that are historically underemployed, living on very low incomes, and I know that the federal government made some changes recently, and advocates in the disability community who said, like, nowhere near what's needed. Now, I will say that the Green Party has talked about a livable wage or a guaranteed income.
Okay.
So we've just computed here in New Brunswick, our living wage now in New Brunswick is $24 an hour. Minimum wage is like $15. So
we are far off.
Yeah, we're far off. Like I did a calculation on 2021 StatsCan data. We had 628,000 people working over the age of 15. Now, if you're 15 working, you're probably at a
Right.
Tim Hortons, McDonald's, whatever. That's the data that I had. 440,000 of those 628,000 wouldn't be making a living wage today. 62%. So, no wonder we have the
Jeez.
problems that we have. And look, while it might be crystal clear to me, like if you think your life's getting better with another conservative government in New Brunswick, I'm very worried for you because I don't think it is.
Okay. What about for francophones? If my memory is correct, Mr. Higgs and they don't seem to get along very well, and there might have been some history with the
Yeah.
Confederation of Regions Party that
Yeah,
exists
it's
at some point.
the core party. I mean, look, I don't think there's anything that Blaine Higgs could do to convince most francophones that he gets them, that he values their culture, that he's going to respect their language rights, their rights, charter rights to services in their language. So from that perspective, I mean, Blaine Higgs is not going to win the francophone vote on francophone issues. You might have a francophone that prioritizes surpluses over their own
Right.
language rights, that maybe, but the premier has really made no marked effort to speak French. Susan Holt, the Liberal leader, is fluently bilingual. It was a beautiful illustration of a system that can work at her campaign launch, her nomination for her riding. Her daughter got up and spoke, beautifully, fluently bilingual, spoke French, introducing her mom as the candidate that then went on to be nominated. And it was just one of those heartwarming moments. And it can work. French immersion works when you fund it, but we have a crisis again in our healthcare system. So Blaine Higgs is not winning the francophone vote. He has recruited some like the mayor of Campbellton or Bathurst or somewhere in the north is running for him, and running a campaign that Liberals have disregarded the north for decades. We'll see how that plays out. But this comment says it very well. Most francophones know that Blaine Higgs is not on, because in his core, excuse that pun, but in his core, he doesn't value francophones.
See, that's really interesting. That's one thing I've never understood. I'm one of those. Well, I'm not a kid anymore, but one of those kids. I grew up in Ontario. I didn't go to immersion. I went to full French because my mother had the French language rights, hereditary, because she was francophone. But I did almost the entirety of my schooling from pre-K through university in French in Ontario. So much so, English is my mother tongue, the first language spoken at home. Because I didn't start learning French until I started pre-K, really, other than a couple of words at home here and there. And so French is actually my second language, but it's actually my dominant tongue now because I did all, I know all my jargon for my profession and everything in French because I studied in. So I know it is possible to live in a province that is predominantly Anglophone, where you are the linguistic minority, get your education in French, have a wonderful career in French, and end up speaking French. Like my French and English are so the same that when I speak in French, I don't even have an accent different from what it's still this voice in French, right? Which everybody, often people sort of have an accent. So and you never lose by having other languages, particularly now in a super connected world.
Yeah, but it's those wedge issues, though. Again, right? I mean, it's when convenient, he supports francophones in theory, and then when convenient, he lets people go on about how francophones steal all of our jobs. He's celebrating record population growth, which more people came to New Brunswick through COVID than came in the previous 20 years. Then he's putting out a press release that the federal government's gonna jam 4,500 asylum seekers down our throats. Like it's that. The right leaders don't do that. They say, look, here are the facts. And yes, we have to be very smart about our immigration and asylum seeking approach to immigration, and that includes asylum seekers. But they don't use it as a weapon. Like, what he did just as the election was kicking off is he did it for theatrics, and he made anyone that looks like a newcomer or an immigrant, he made their life less safe, right? Because he is saying asylum seekers are causing your rent increases, asylum seekers are this, asylum seekers are that. So I say, like, which is it, Mr. Premier? Like, in one breath you're celebrating, right. And largely what he does that is annoying to me, or it's an annoying trait as a leader, is he takes and claims all of the celebration, even if they're not even attributable to him, and ignores the challenges.
Okay.
Right.
I see that. So far in this campaign, what would you say is the issue that has been most overplayed and the one that has critical but has not gotten the play that it deserves yet?
Well, I think most overplayed is the just by the Tories, the parental rights. I mean, I think they just it's just easy for them. It's a wedge issue. They've accused Susan Holt of looking to cut parents out of the conversation, which is absolutely not true. I've heard Susan say this publicly. She's a parent. She wants to be involved. Parents absolutely should be involved, and kid safety needs to be paramount. And she's committed to implementing the report of the Child and Youth Advocate, by the way, hired by Blaine Higgs, and a majority of the legislature asked the Child and Youth Advocate to go out, engage on this issue, and write a report. So that's actually governance. She's actually following a governance model that I respect. So that's been most overplayed. And then probably that with a close, like the HST cut will take $450 million out of revenue, and you'd have to spend $50,000 to save 1,000. Well, if you're one of those 440,000 people not making a living wage, you're not buying a new car. Right. So I would say healthcare is the issue that New Brunswickers care most about. And the parties have been talking about it, but Blaine Higgs's approach is just basically status quo. He said in 2018, we don't need to spend any more money and we're going to innovate. And he's saying in 2024, we don't need to spend any more money and we're going to innovate, but it's not working.
Okay. If there is one issue, what in your opinion is in the closing days, the one issue on which, I hate to say the word attack, so one could draw contrast with Blaine Higgs or point out that he has done a terrible job that has not been explored enough?
Yeah, I mean, look, I just think I think people are pretty solid. I mean, I think people either, look, we have that partisan approach. We have it in America, we have it in Canada. No matter what, I'm a Tory, or no matter what, I'm a Liberal. I don't prescribe to that camp. I look for leadership. I care about my local candidates and so on. So what percentage of the vote is that? Is it a third? It probably is a good solid third, right? I think people know, like, people either like Blaine Higgs or they don't like Blaine Higgs. So I think this is, is there going to be enough of a groundswell for change? I think he has really taken the party to a new, really off to the right, and he has alienated and disenfranchised centrists, progressive conservatives who care about fiscal management, but certainly want to help people. And so, center line, progressive conservatives, he's really alienated those folks. And I'll give you an example. I was somewhere recently and a person stopped me. I didn't even know them. And they said, look, I'm a Tory. I've always been a Tory, and I can't believe it, but I'm going to vote against Blaine Higgs this time. I'm not putting a lawn sign for anyone else. I'm not doing a poll. I'm just going to walk into the booth and I'm going to vote. That's what's going to be interesting to see how that shows up. And I think there's a lot of those people that they know they're going to take a loss. Blaine Higgs is going to go away, and they're going to try to reclaim their party and rebuild for 4 years from now. So I think people know him fairly well. And I think it's just going to come down to, do enough people show up that want to change, and that vote split on the left is going to play a big part here too.
Does your ear to the ground seem to indicate that there is, like, I know that the Angus Reid polling is showing that only like 3 in 10 New Brunswickers actually sort of approve of his job performance up until now, but you're still looking at the polls, and well, the most recent poll, which is a little dated now, that it seems to be close. So does your ear to the ground seem to indicate that even though the numbers seem to be close, that there really is a groundswell for change, or it really is it just it really could go either way?
Yeah, I think it's still, I think it's Susan's by a seat or two, the Liberals by a seat or two, but it's but look, I mean, I think it's an old Roosevelt quote that I share often. You've got to remember that everything happens in politics the way it was designed to happen. So I think when ridings are designed, they're designed, typically by the party in power to favor themselves. And there's, rural, like, see, New Brunswick has the highest, we're still about 50% rural and 50% urban.
Okay.
Right. And that's the, where everywhere else in the country over the last 20, 30 years, the urban populations continue to grow and the rural population stayed flat. We're about 50-50, right? So rural populations tend to really be conservative voters. And so they're still weighted very heavily, even though the majority, like if you draw a circle around the 8 cities in New Brunswick, that's 75% of GDP and probably 75% of population, but the electoral boundaries don't reflect that.
Okay.
So all that's going to play out, and then the vote split is going to play out. I just think it's going to be very close. I mean, it's not going to be. I would be shocked if it's a blowout. It's not a Frank McKenna. It's not a Frank McKenna blowout here coming.
Okay.
And I think that the parties know that. I think the Conservatives have struggled this time to raise money. And that's why Blaine Higgs went out west and Steve Outhouse had him in Alberta and all that kind of stuff. I think there's been a lot of out of province money in this election, which by the way, Susan Holt has pledged to stop, to end that. And I agree with that. We shouldn't have out of province money buying our elections. It's going to be close. It's going to be a squeaker, but there's been support for the Conservatives in the volunteer base and in donations collapse. And, I think it'll be a nail biter right to the finish line.
So that's interesting, because we were Mr. Grizzly and I were having the conversation about British Columbia, given that the BC Conservative Party is relatively new, and even though it's close in the polls, my question was, but given that it's a new party, do they have the ground game? Do they have all the people in places where they get out the vote on the day? Here, Mr. Higgs has had a lot of people abandon him, but it seems that he's not alone. He's more like switched one group of backers for an entire other group of backers that have its own system. But the fundraising is not as good. Do you think that maybe, if not in numbers, at least in experience or whatnot, the loss in terms of people, organizers and people that would go knock on doors and all that kind of stuff, has the party seemed to be like less active or have taken a hit on that front, and that might make a difference?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, just a quick, before I answer, I've got a quick time check myself. I probably got another 3 minutes and I got to get into the city for an appointment. I think they've had a collapse, but they knew that. I mean, I think, the big parties, I've really noticed, my child is running with the Green Party, because that's the party that aligns with their values, and the third parties really struggle. I mean, it's a shame, because it really speaks to our democracy. Phenomenal candidate. I'm biased, of course, but they're competent, motivated, skilled. They've got voice, all that, but they don't have the support around them. So, it's more difficult. I would say Tories have always been, the Conservatives here, at least in New Brunswick, have always been great at the volunteer base, getting out the vote, election day, the data, all of that. I think that has collapsed a bit for them, and liberals are decent at that, but I would say in my observation, not as good. I think that's where Steve Outhouse, like him or not, he's not my kind of guy. I mean, rumor around between his 3 different companies is he's billing $1 million. And let's not forget that this ethical premier of ours hired Steve Outhouse as his principal secretary, paying him over $20,000 a month. And sorry for my skepticism that he wasn't working on campaign issues leading up to the campaign. I mean, come on. I always love, conservatives are very righteous on treating taxpayers' money well while they're abusing it in behind the scenes, right? So I would say it's not as good, but I suspect, Steve is probably pretty good at that. Get out the vote, the data, and really getting people to the door. So, they're probably still decently strong there.
All right.
Yeah.
I know that you have to go.
Yes.
So I will thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
And hopefully we'll be able to chat with each other soon. And from the comments in the chat, the kids really did enjoy what it is you had to bring today. A lot of people who are not in New Brunswick enjoyed learning about how things are over there in another part of the country. So hopefully our New Brunswick watchers got a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, I hope so. Let's follow up after the election. And thanks for the opportunity to your audience. And I enjoyed the chat. And let's keep up the good fight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, Kits and Cubs. That was former Mayor of St. John, Don Darling. We have a couple of more minutes before we have to sign off. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to mention to you, Kits and Cubs. There was a wonderful article today in the CBC with regard to the election. So if you're there, it says the 6 or 9 or 14 ridings that may determine the election. So if you want to check that out, they're looking at 6 key ridings here that, if they all go Liberal, could deprive the PCs of that majority. So on election night, you want to be looking for Fredericton South Silverwood, St. John Harbour, St. John Portland's Simmons, Moncton East, Miramichi Beniguac, and Chandory Irishtown. And then there are other ridings that might be pivotal. According to the article, it says the PCs would be reduced to 24 seats if the Liberals sweep all 6 of those constituencies, one short of a majority, but the Liberals would rather have a majority and not rely on the Green Party to pass budgets and legislation. In Fredericton North and Miramichi East, they believe there's a chance they can defeat PC candidates Jill Green and Michelle Conroy, and they are hoping that the former federal PC MP John Herron, running as Liberal, will defeat PC candidate Faytine Grasecci in Hampton Fundy St. Martin's. Faytine Grasecci is that charismatic, super evangelical leader who's, in my opinion, very, very, very dangerous, but seems to be very good at making herself seem not. Winning those 3 additional seats would give the Liberals the 25-seat majority, assuming nothing else changes in that. Of course, the Greens are under pressure because even though they are running a good campaign and the leader is quite liked, there is a small possibility that they could emerge from this election without any seats as well. But there's also just as good as a chance, it seems, that they could emerge with 1 or 2 seats. And if one of the other 2 parties maxes out at 24, then the Greens will hold the balance of power. So it could be a very interesting outcome once all the ballots are cast in that province. So that's what we have for the moment for New Brunswick. I wanted to touch on a couple of other stories very quickly for you, Kits and Cubs. As mentioned while we were chatting, the inflation numbers came out from Statistics Canada yesterday for the month of September, according to the CBC's Jenna Benchitrit. She says, Canada's inflation rate fell to 1.6% in September, Statistics Canada reported Tuesday, after hitting the Bank of Canada's 2% goal in August, so we are below now the target rate. The data agency said the numbers marked the smallest year-over-year increase to the Consumer Price Index since February 2021. Lower gasoline prices, which fell by 10.7% on a yearly basis, drove inflation down last month. With gasoline excluded, the all-items inflation rate came in at 2.2%, the same as August. The agency noted that prices remain elevated, especially for rented groceries, even as inflation has cooled off. For the second consecutive month, food prices did grow faster, at a faster rate than headline inflation. But then again, headline inflation dropped from 2.4 to 2%, or so, I think it is 2.4 to 2%, and then from 2% to 1.6. So, I mean, at some point, yes, food is going to grow faster, but I think it may have picked up a little speed over the previous month as well. So it has gone up, but it seems that it's growing faster just by relative to the speed at which the inflation rate has dropped over the past 2 months. Prices declined on a yearly basis for seafood and other marine products, nuts and seeds and fish, but increased for fresh and frozen beef and eggs. Rent prices increased at a slower pace in September, rising 8.2% year over year compared to 8.9% in August, with slower growth in Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick, and British Columbia. Some analysts think that the reading makes a 50 basis point rate cut more likely at the Bank of Canada's October 23rd meeting. The bank has so far cut the rate 3 times this year. Quote, Canadian headline inflation decelerated by more than expected last month, lowering the hurdle to an outsized rate cut at next week's Bank of Canada meeting, said Carl Shimata, chief market strategist at Corpay. Quote, we're still not convinced that the Canadian economy needs an emergency scale response, but there is little question today's data will lower the downside risks associated with moving more aggressively, Shimata said. And that's an interesting thing because we had the jobs report come out not too long ago, stating that we had some pretty strong job growth for that last month that was evaluated, and that decreased the odds that the Bank of Canada would give us a 50 basis point rate cut on October 23rd. But this drop in the inflation numbers is so marked that puts that back in play. So on the day that the jobs report numbers came out, people that were betting, for lack of a better word, that the rate would go down by 50 basis points, that had shifted. The markets were predicting at a 75% rate that the rate cut. I'm trying to say this without repeating the same words because I'm noticing that the words are in common because I'm talking about 2 different percentages, and I'm not doing it as eloquently as I could. So let me try that again. People that were assessing the markets overall were stating that the chances of a 25 basis point cut on October 23rd had increased to 75 out of 100, instead of being more likely a 50% basis cut. And now that the inflation numbers have come up, it seems that there are more analysts now that are thinking, yes, indeed, we can go ahead with the 50 point basis cut. So the odds keep on shifting as the data comes in. So in about 7 days, or in 7 days exactly, we will find out from the Bank of Canada whether or not we have that bigger cut. A lot of economists are asking for it, saying that we're a little behind the curve yet, although with the unemployment rate dipping a little bit by 0.1% with the last jobs number, maybe we've angled or we've turned around that curve as well. In the United States, there have been some news stories recently. I think Politico was the publication stating that the United States right now actually has a dream economy with all these metrics. We generally lag a little bit behind the United States, but with our inflation low and interest rates going down and unemployment numbers going down and growth numbers going up, and with various groups indicating that Canada is going to be one of the better performers among its G7 peers in 2025. Again, the longer we can go before the next federal election, the less and less the numbers in the narrative is going to be good for what Pierre Poilievre has been selling for the last 2 years or so, and better an advantage for the Liberals. Now, whether or not that will make any difference, because again, the whole issue is whether or not Canadians have just tuned the Prime Minister out and don't want to hear from him. And it doesn't matter how good the economic numbers are, ultimately, they just want change. So that will be the main issue. But it looks like, barring a major global event, if the current trend is our friend, and if we actually have the next federal election in October 2025, the economic numbers would be very, very good for the incumbent party, assuming that the majority of the population hasn't just soured so much on the incumbent party that doesn't matter how good the economic numbers are, right? But for all the people that are still experiencing the me session over the recession, things might start to seem better over the next year if the current trend and current numbers maintain over that period of time. So it is really good news, which might explain why it is we didn't hear much from Pierre Poilievre yesterday, because everybody was sort of wondering if he would come out and say something with regard to India. And it didn't look like he was, but he might have. We knew that he had plans for the evening to go to some type of event at a private residence. So while this was going on, Pierre was still doing what Pierre does best, which is put himself first. Yeah, we didn't, when those inflation numbers came in, I said, yeah, we probably won't be hearing from him today because, well, something good happened for Canada. So he's probably in the shower with a cheesecake, crying. Because when good things happen to Canada, Pierre cries. Doesn't make him happy. Because we're supposed to be broken. But it seems we're not. Right? Yesterday also, one of the big things that happened, as we mentioned, the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, did have a press conference. And unfortunately, this is the second time that Mr. Singh has a press conference specifically on issues related to foreign interference. The first one was after he read the unredacted report, NSICOP report, that is informing the Foreign Influence Commission, Justice Hoag's commission at the moment. And when he came out, you'll remember he came to the microphone and he said, I've read it and I'm very, very, very concerned. Well, he started yesterday's press conference the same way. He said, the private briefing that he got with regard to foreign interference and all the activities of the government of India that are being alleged by the RCMP confirmed what are the public reports. Well, that's exactly what he said with the NSICOP thing too. He says, I read the NSICOP report and it confirms what we said. Well, I would hope that a report on what it is that we are studying confirms what it is we've been hearing publicly about the study. That just seems to be a rather empty statement. He did land a few roundhouses on Pierre Poilievre during the press availability, but it does seem to me that was really the main point of it, unfortunately, because there didn't seem to be much else like his press conference with regard to the NSICOP report. People were asking him, because Elizabeth May went first, why is your reading of it so different than hers? And it was a question that he just was not able to answer. I remember that when he had the press conference stating that he was, confirming that he had ripped up the supply and confidence agreement deal with the Liberals, there were a couple of questions about, what it meant about how he was going to vote in the future, and why are you not taking him down if you are saying that he's too beholden, too weak, too all that kind of stuff? And he didn't have an answer. This one press conference, it would seem that the media came in with the story it wanted to write, already decided, and the story was Jagmeet Singh, victim of foreign influence. like this Jagmeet Singh threatened by, and he has been asked, it's like, were you threatened? Because in the original report we know that he was mentioned. Original interim report, we knew that he was mentioned, and Jagmeet Singh kept on, decided to take the tack. Well, it's not about me. I want us to be focused on Canadians. But he was asked many, many, many times. He was pressed many, many times. The journalists just didn't seem to want to let that go. They really wanted to write the Jagmeet Singh threatened by India article, and he was giving them nothing. And they were extremely frustrated, which I have no problem with, because, hey, that means they'd actually have to do the work that day and actually trying to dig and find a story. It wouldn't just be the spoon-fed, easy thing that they can run with. But it left him in the same dynamic again as, the question that everybody wants asked. And listen, you're the leader of the major party. You're probably the most prominent Sikh in Canada at the moment. Canadians are very interested in knowing, have you personally been threatened? And, it's not about me. So it was an ultimately unsatisfying press conference in that sense. One of the haymakers that he landed on Pierre Poilievre was this quote here: "I love our country. I love our democracy. I would do anything to protect it. I can't imagine any political leader who also wouldn't do anything to protect our country, and that's why it troubles me deeply that Pierre Poilievre is unwilling to receive security clearance and to fully understand what is going on. I don't want the Indian government, which is who the RCMP is implicated in this, and the Modi government specifically. I don't want the Indian government or Modi to think that they've got someone in Canada who's willing to look the other way to ignore what's going on. We need to take an approach where we're all on the same side, that we're all denouncing this very serious series of allegations, and that we're standing united to do everything possible to protect Canadians. That's why my team will be calling for an emergency meeting of the Public Safety Committee to look at other steps we can take to keep Canadians safe. We'll also urge Canada to ban the RSS, which is a right-wing extremist militant group from India that has branches in other countries, including in Canada, that promotes violence and division. We'll also urge Canada to impose severe and strict sanctions on Indian diplomats." So that was basically his request for yesterday. It seemed that yesterday the word serious was the word of the day. He mentioned it so many times, along with saying that he was deeply troubled, or he found something, Pierre Poilievre's position, deeply troubling, and he was deeply concerned. So if you got anything from the press conference yesterday, is that this is a very, very serious situation, and he's deeply concerned and deeply troubled. Asked about they were asking about one of the reasons that the Conservatives are using for Pierre not getting a security clearance, saying that he'd be muzzled. He mentioned, I can only think he's making the decision for partisan reasons, and I'm urging him to put partisanship aside. And when he's talking about the fact that we have laid out that diplomats from the RCMP has laid out that diplomats from the Indian government were involved in hiring and directing organized crime members in Canada. He just doesn't understand that Pierre would not want to know everything. And that's, there is a reason why every federal leader has agreed to look at those documents, has agreed to get the security clearance. And that's why I'm deeply troubled that Pierre Poilievre wants to be the only federal leader in a time when we have active threats against Canadians, that he wants to be the only leader that doesn't want to look at what's going on. That does send a message to the Indian government that there is one leader that's willing to look away. That, to me, is deeply troubling. Like I said, clearly the point of the sortie was to put the spotlight on Poilievre, who's been stricken with a sudden case of onset acute political mutism since this stuff has come out, so that media peppers him with uncomfortable questions the next time he faces the media. However, Singh would probably have been more effective at this had he simply made a statement video, because the Q&A portion was essentially a waste of time. Even though he did get 2 more shots in on Poilievre during the question and answer period. And the reason I say this is because as hard as Mr. Singh worked to frame this as, quote, very serious and deeply concerning situation with a very troubling reality as it pertains to PP, in which the safety of Canadians is supposed to be paramount, he didn't have much to offer us on the keeping us safe portion. He was also asked in the Q&A, like, well, sanctions, well, won't that cripple us economically? And it was like, you have to understand that I'm talking about sanctions against individuals here, not sanctions against the actual country at this point. So will it increase the pressure on the press to take this? Mr. Singh came out, and Mr. Polyev, you've been bashing him a lot, and he's threw these couple of punches your way. How do you respond to this to get Pierre maybe talking about it? Because there still is nothing, no audio or video with his face or voice speaking to this yet. And yesterday, he did not seem to address it on his socials before going out to that event at a private home over the course of the evening. The final bit of news is that today the Prime Minister will also be testifying once again at the foreign interference inquiry. He'll be the last big name to testify, so you might want to watch that today. I can't remember off the top of my head at what time that is scheduled, but that will be happening today. It'll be a very important day in that commission, and that will probably be the end of that type of testimony at that point. And then from that point on, there'll be one or two more of those expert panels to find out a little bit more in depth what it is going on. But that will probably be the end of the actual public testimony itself. According to iPolitics, the appearance starts at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, so in about 40 minutes from now. All right, kits and cubs. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show, True North Eager Beaver interview project with Mr. Don Darling, former mayor of St. John. We hope that you enjoyed this episode because we loved making it for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. And you do have the mouths from which we want the words to come. So if you would like to tell your peeps and poops all about us, we would really like that. Now, if you would like to support us in other ways, you can go to our pod page. That's podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver, lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words. Or if you scan that QR code that just appeared, it'll bring you right there. Thanks to the Ray Girl for sponsoring it. And if you go there, you click subscribe. And when we have an episode that comes fresh off the bandwidth, it comes directly to you. So that way you make sure that you do not miss an episode in any way, shape, or form. Now, if there's other ways that you would like to help us, then you need to make like Kit Elaine and surf yourself on down to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, Kits and Cubs, like 12,500 of you have so far. And there we have buttons, like, share, and subscribe. And there you have to make like Cassie and click them all. Just click them, click them, click them. It makes us happy. Go crazy with it. Have a lot of fun. And it helps us out immensely. When we appreciate everything that you do. Now, if you would like to support us in other ways, for example, financially, because there are some costs to putting the show together, and any help that we can get covering this would be greatly appreciated. It is a labor of love, but it does cost a little bit of money. So financial help does go a long way. You can do that by contributing to the Emergency Hydration Fund, or our tip jar. And that's available at our coffee page. That's coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, lowercase letters, all in one word. Buy us a coffee, give us a pat on the back, say atta boys or atta critters, atta beaver, atta bear. And we would really appreciate that very much because every dollar actually does help a lot. The QR code that just appeared will bring you there as well. And if you're not able to contribute financially, please don't worry, because the gift of your participation and the gift of your attention are the ones that we cherish the most. And we absolutely love to hear from you. So you can write to us at truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about the show. Good, bad, or ugly. If it's ugly, please be gentle. You can also write to us at our Twitter feed at True Eager, our Facebook page, True North Eager Beaver, or if you happen to be listening on YouTube, right down where our comment section is, leave us a little word. We thank you very much for all of that. We appreciate it. We try to read everything. Just may not always be able to get back to you, but we do try to read everything. And we appreciate your commentary and all the stuff that you do to help us bring the show. When you send us tips and articles that you think we should read and all that good stuff, it really does help. So thank you for all of that. If you happen to be listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us some stars and some reviews. Those also help us get notice, and it helps with the algorithm and all that good stuff. Because democracy is something that you do, kits and cubs, if you are in New Brunswick, advanced polling days have now closed. So election day is on the 19th, very, very short. So please do that. And if you are looking to get some information on Liberal leader Susan Holt, we did 2 interviews with her earlier this year, one around end of January in English, and then one about a month later in French. So if you look up True North Eager Beaver and Susan Holt, that should pretty much take you there. Take some time to go listen to them en anglais et en français. Because New Brunswick's a bilingual province, we decided to do it in both official languages, and she agreed to sit for 2 interviews. So she was very generous with her time. That might help you make an informed decision if you're looking to know more about her. So we did all that part. So I guess words of wisdom. When you're trying something like I was yesterday to play curling and nothing's working for you whatsoever, try to surrender to the fact that this is not going to be your day and just try to enjoy the process. There you go. Okay, kits and cubs, let's see if I can stick this landing here, because I think it's time for me to cue the cock. Let's see if I have the right one. No, that's the intro. This might be the right one. Let's try this. All right. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. All right, kits and cubs. Just a little couple of things. Mr. Grizzly had to go, so I think Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays with his new gig, he'll have to skip out around 8 a.m. in the mornings to get to his gig. So just wanted to let you know that was what was going on. As a result of this, if you're tuning in to Mademoiselle Fox's show, which usually aired on Thursdays, that will now switch to Fridays, and it will be called Foxy Friday. So pay to look for that. And Kit Linda, during the chat, you said something about Policy 713, thinking it would not survive the charter. A challenge. You are correct. That's what a lot of people and analysts seem to be saying. But yes, in the meantime, until we get there and we get a final decision, a lot of people are going to be hurt in the meantime. Tomorrow, we will have another guest, Gail Costello, an educator for over 30 years in the province of New Brunswick, to talk to us a little bit more about what's going on there for on the election scene. So we hope that you join us. All right, kids and cubs, I think that is everything. So I will wish you a most beaverific day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.